we're back. I slept on it, as you can see. Um, I listened to a podcast on that actually. Stuff you should know. If you haven't ever or listened to Stuff You Should Know, you should give it a try. They have something for everyone. You could be an engineer, listen to their engineering episodes. You could be an actor, listen to their acting episodes. Um, they're two really cool guys. They seem really down to earth. And I've listened to them for 6 years now, on and off, not regularly at all. Um, just kind of as I go. Um, but there is anyway. What I'm trying to get at is there is genuinely a science behind sleeping on it. The episode I listened to was if you have to make a big decision, say something in work or I'm not sure. Basically, if you have a big decision in your life, sleep on it. Don't make an impulsive decision. Take some time and actually go to sleep and leave it till the next day. And it, I can't remember the study. I won't be able to describe it now. But basically, those who had a big decision to make and didn't sleep on it versus those who did sleep on it tended to make the better decision. It's a really good episode, really interesting. Um, and yeah, I'd highly recommend listening to them. But where we left off was I was trying to calculate or at least remember the ratio of how many planks do we need to convert logs into charcoal, right? So you have logs here, you can convert them into planks. We started with 64 logs, and there's of course a balance. There's an equation to if you make 64 planks, you can't make any logs into charcoal. You don't want to have too few planks either, because then you're left over with logs. So there's a balance. It's a ratio, and I could not for the life of me remember what that ratio was. So I went to ChatGPT and I was like, look, come here, just tell me the number, please. Like I don't need the life story. I don't need the formula. Like please just give me the number that I need to do this. Before I fall asleep at my desk. And yeah, apparently the number is 10. So rather 10 logs. So you take 10 logs, you convert it into 40 planks, and then using those 40 planks, you can convert the remaining logs into charcoal. So I think there's something funky going on here. I think we will be left with some logs, but apparently that's the ratio. Um, and yeah, I suppose that's what I really like about Minecraft, especially for young kids, is the kind of math without forcing kids to do math, So I'd say in a class of 30, I'm pulling numbers out of here now, right? I'm not a statistician. I don't have any facts to back up what this is just purely my opinion. In a class of 30 students under the age of 50, we'll say, as soon as you begin a maths class, I'd say 15 out of the 30 start to zone out. And maybe that's because they struggle with maths. So we'll say within that 15, some struggle with maths, so they zone out, and the other portion they just don't care. They simply couldn't care less, and they just want to be outside playing. You know, and you bloody tree. Anyway. But like what the cool thing that Minecraft does is all these numbers kind of fit into each other, and you can do some really really cool math with Minecraft. Um, like that example I just talked about with the logs. Like to do that on paper, it would be quite a complex equation to basically say like ChatGPT did it. I could pull up the equation now. I'm just not gonna. So it'll take time and all this kind of stuff. But essentially you have an inequality. You have a value, we'll say 10 is less than x is, and then x is less than 64, whatever it is, right? If that's not making sense, I might put on screen what an inequality is, just for those that might not know. But basically, you're talking algebra. You're talking quite a complex algebra equation for someone who's between the ages of 10 and 15. Even me, I think today I would struggle to do the math without the context of Minecraft. So yeah, I think it's really cool. I know um, at least a few years ago they had like Minecraft School Edition, didn't they? And never played it, never looked at it, never watched the video. But like my understanding is that like certain schools were using Minecraft to teach kids, and I don't know how exactly. Like maybe it was teaching them about farming or like this, like sustainable forestry. You know, you cut a tree down, you plant a tree in its place, and that way you never run out of trees. I don't know, but you could argue that like Minecraft is quite good for a young person's education, um, and not in the traditional sense. You know, we like traditional education is or should be is in many countries. There's some out there on the western side of the Atlantic that you know sometimes don't value education. But anyway, education should be valued. It's a privilege, and not a lot of people in the world have access to it, at least for free, right? And it is very, very important for a young person's development, and it opens doors for that young person in the future. You know, without school, arguably you can't become an engineer, and that means you can't get certain jobs. You know, I'm just talking about my own experiences here. Um, that's the traditional way of doing things. You know, you take 30 kids, you put them in a classroom with a teacher at the head of the table teaching them maths. Yeah, it works. Yeah, sure it does. But they're, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, bees. Hopefully they're okay. They seem to be okay. Um, yeah, I think they're okay. You know, that's one way of doing it for sure. The traditional classroom setting where you teach students a subject, but you know, maybe there are other ways of doing it. You know, especially for neurodivergent people or people with learning disabilities and stuff like that, where they really struggle to be in a traditional setting, um, especially with a group of people the same age as them. You know, they some people find that really really challenging, um, due to being neurodivergent or just you know social anxiety. So like Redstone, and eventually I do want to do a little bit of Redstone on this series. You know, it's funny because my friends watched my video on Noel's Tower, and they were like, "Oh, I'm not really familiar with Minecraft." So I'm like, "Shit, I have to I have to cater to an audience that may not know what I'm talking about." You know. Um, so Redstone is an ore in this game that you can find in the ground, obviously, and you can use it to. It's essentially like electrical cables. You can use it to power things in this game. And to do the electrical circuits, if we want to call them that correctly, you need to use logic gates. Um, it's something that I studied and didn't do that well in, but something that I studied in college. Different logic gates. So there's one type of logic gate that's called an AND gate. So something needs to happen and another thing needs to happen for the output. So you have input A, input B, and you get output C. And input A and output B needs to happen before you can get output C. Once again, this space. I'm really gonna need to tidy up my PC because we keep running out of disk space. So I was just talking about AND gates. It's quite late now, so I'll wrap this up very shortly. Um, but essentially, there's these different type of gates or logic criteria that you need for certain things to work um, in electronics, right? And it's the very kind of basis of coding or circuit boards. You know, like my PC, for example, is built on logic. And I don't mean logic as I'm not being a smart arse and saying, oh, you know, it's simple. You just need to plug in the PC. No, logic is a set of rules that must be followed. And essentially, you can only have one output for a given circumstance, right? In this game, Redstone has that. It's getting to nighttime. Oh, my timings are all off today, lads. I ran out of food. We were gearing up to go on a little trip over there. We ran out of food, so I had to get food. Once I got food, it was nighttime again. By the time I got there, it was nighttime again. I nearly died. I'm just struggling today. Um, but I suppose that's what happens when you don't have an agenda. You don't have any talking points. And I'm going the wrong way. Can't find what I'm doing. We're having a mare, lads. We're having an absolute mare. Light this area up. So yeah, for the third or fourth time me trying to say this, Minecraft has redstone, and through redstone you can essentially get the basics of coding or electronics. Um, you know, in Minecraft you push a button that activates the redstone. The redstone opens a door. That's electronics. That's a light switch. That's you push the light switch and the light turns on. And it's not framed as electronics. I really, really struggled with electrical engineering in college. Basically, since I was 15, I was quite good at physics, um, mechanical physics. But as soon as we got to electricity, it just started to fall away from me. I really struggled. But had I focused on redstone a little bit more in Minecraft, maybe I would have understood it a bit more. I don't know. It's hard to say. But it's great for kids, where something like electronics or logic gates or even coding, quite niche, arbitrary subjects to talk about, especially when you can't really show them. It's really hard for someone to visualize what electricity actually is in terms of resistance and voltage and amps. Um, there's a great kind of schematic that is probably quite old now, where you have a little character, the resistor. I might put it on screen just to save the description, but it's a really good way of capturing like what resistance does to a circuit. Um, it's really hard to explain that to someone. But you bring them into a Minecraft world, you have a redstone circuit, and provided they have some knowledge of what Minecraft is and how redstone works, you could probably explain it to them much better than an equation could in a classroom. Um, and that, in my opinion, is really powerful. Um, like, yes, there's a lot of debate around standardized tests. Some of the happiest countries in the world, I think, either Norway or Sweden or possibly Finland, one of the Scandinavian countries, have the highest quality of life. The if you can measure happiness, they're a really happy country, and they have a really really high return on secondary and third level education. A lot of kids stay in education until essentially until they're adults or even older. Um, they might go on to do a master's, for example, and their education system believes in like not really having standardized tests and not giving homework and stuff like this. So I think there's huge scope to debate our current education systems and how we teach young people, um, versus what could be. You know, um, there might be a better way of doing stuff out there, and we just haven't explored it yet. Because how do you overhaul a 600-year-old system? I would say, maybe even older. I'll Google how old the oldest university in the world is, and that'll tell you. Um, a really, really kind of hard thing to do. But I started school, or rather, when I started school, we had books. You're like, yeah, no shit, James. Obviously, but we only had books. We had big, thick textbooks, and now, like Orla's younger sister, she's just about to finish school, secondary level, and basically her whole secondary school life she's used an iPad. Yes, they still have books. They can still go and buy the textbook and they can study from the textbook. For sure they can. But a lot of their homework is done on the iPad, where they have to do assignments and submit them through some portal, some school portal on their iPad, And that is for this generation coming up, this younger generation, the kind of generation after me, that is critical for their development in this new kind of world because like I know people my age who really can't grasp technology. Um, I'm lucky that my job demands it of me. So as technology changes, I'm kind of on the front lines of that in many cases. But I know people my age that can't work computers. Um, and maybe there's something to be said for that, Like we shouldn't we shouldn't focus too much on computers either. There is an argument there, of course there is. But your kind of daily tasks, your kind of life things. More and more things are being computerized or electrified, if that's how you describe it. Everything's becoming more electronic. If you don't know how to work a smartphone, like you don't know how to do internet banking, you know, and that's a huge kind of like you're being held back essentially. You're holding yourself back. Um, as the world moves on, you're kind of being left behind, and it's kind of a scary prospect because, like, what if I don't want to use the PC? What if I don't want to use a computer? And the world's like tough. You don't really have a choice. Like, either learn how to use this or like, be left in the dust. And I don't really agree with that either. But yeah, I think uh, if I do have kids, I think the system in which my children are educated in is going to be vastly different to the system I was educated in. To the point now where like I can use AI like ChatGPT to do some of my tasks and work. Now, I'm not asking it to do a presentation for me, and I'm certainly not asking it to do calculations where I ask it, I go, hey, I'm dealing with the human body. Um, can you run this quick calculation for me? Because that would be dangerous. I need to be the one who confirms the numbers and make sure that my work is safe for human use, of course. But for small, stupid little things, I use AI, and that's very, very basic stuff that I'm talking about. Um, so yeah, within a few years, I think we're gonna see kids being taught in a very, very different way, um, for better or for worse. I guess we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's really cool to see that video games can be used this way. Um, there's a lot of sort of stigma around video games and young kids, even young adults. Um, they kind of get branded with, they're not good for you, and I would heavily argue that. Yeah, some games aren't good for you. They make you super aggressive. They make you super angry. I can talk about that in my next episode for sure, because I was one of those people. Oh look, we did use all of our logs, so that's great. Good to know. What I'm gonna do is put up here 10, 40 planks and 50 logs or something, so I don't forget. Um, but that's great. We can make torches. We can make stone bricks or even smooth stone if we want. Um, and I'll keep going with this. I want to ideally have 2 rows here filled out, maybe even 3 rows filled out with charcoal slash coal. Um, so yeah, a big long spiel about what logic gates, AI, and education systems. None of it structured, none of it planned, but that's how we roll. So look, I'm gonna go to bed. It's quite late now. I've work tomorrow, so yeah, I'll speak to you guys in the next one. Bye for now.